First, I want to say a couple things about myself. I've been doing this for a little over 20 years. First thing I did, I don't know if any of you remember the wood turning, the wood working exposition they had down in Fort Washington years ago. Well, I went down there and I saw Palmer Sharpless turning away, and it was like, gee, that looks like fun. And that was the end of it. I'm going to show you hollow vessels tonight, but before I get started, I want to tell you that at any point in time, feel free to ask a question. You know, I don't mind, you know, being interrupted. Second thing I'm going to tell you is I am legally blind. So if I don't see you raise your hand or whatever, it's because I only have this much vision. And so I won't see you, but sing out and I will do my best to answer your questions. There was something else there too. Oh, this is just the way that I do it. There are probably 20 other ways to do this, but this is what I work with in my shop, and this is how I do this. So, you know, agree, disagree with me, whatever you like, but, you know, I found that this works for me. So that's about it. I'm going to get started. I'm going to talk about first materials. For most of my hollow forms, I save special pieces of wood for that. Burls, things like that. But, you know, occasionally a nice piece of cherry comes along, and so I make a hollow form out of that. Almost all of them are spindle orientation. I hardly do any cross grain pieces. I don't know why that is, it's just what I do. So what I'll show you is end-grained orientation, spindle orientation. If I start with green wood, sometimes I will rough turn them. This piece started green, obviously, at one point in time. I harvested the wood. But it has dried. It's been in my shop probably, I want to say, 8 or 9 years. I got a lot of wood. Oh, and before I forget, I want to thank you guys for having me here. That should have been the first words out of my mouth. So I'm going to try to get through this in the 2 hours allotted me. I'm not going to do any sanding tonight, so that should make everything easier for everybody. And I'm going to start making some shavings. See if I can get this too. There we go. So when I'm working on a hollow form, the first thing I want to do is rough out the outside. I mean, when I was at home, I turned this into a cylinder, put a tenon on it. I figure you don't need to see me do that. But you know, that's the first step. When I'm doing a hollow form, what I aim to do, and I want to talk about design a little bit too. Design-wise, I like hollow forms with broad shoulders, flat tops, narrow bottoms.
Where's your helmet?
It's in the bag over there. I figure you won't be able to hear me if I wear it. So that's why I'm not wearing it. So I just want to get the shape here. Of the top. Normally, if this was my home shop, what I would probably do is I would probably be, even when this is between centers, I would start my, roughing the shape in. But because I knew I was going to come here and you guys had a different chuck than I have, I really couldn't do that. So I'm just going to rough the shape in.
Like TV turned enough for you to
You guys see me? Yeah. goal here is get rid of some wood. Start seeing a shape. I didn't talk about some of my other topics, but I can do that while I'm getting this shavings down. My hollowing rig, I do all of my hollowing with a captive system. Even for the really small tools. And the reason for that is, the reason I do that is I like to make wood turning as easy as possible. I don't believe in working very hard at this. And so I do as much as I can to make life easy for me. The only time I really push hard on a turning tool is when I'm trying to remove massive amounts of wood. The rest of the time I'm just letting the tool cut. And to that end, I do all of my, I shouldn't say all, most of my sharpening. My turning tools is done with a jet slow speed grinder with an 800 grit CBN wheel on it. So it's almost a razor's edge that I get off of that. So the first step, like I said, is just hogging away wood, getting to a shape that I'm starting to like. I tend to like the widest point of the form to be somewhere around here, thereabouts. I find that if it tapers up to the top a little bit, the curve looks a little bit nicer. And as it tapers towards the bottom, well, like I said, I like narrow bottoms. And I like the bottom to kind of like disappear into the table. Let's finish up this shape a little bit. And flat lines are bad news. I just don't like flat lines. So I will take, general cutting on the tool. Most of the time I'm cutting either on just to the left of the tip if I'm going in that direction, and just to the right of the tip if I'm going this direction. Use a bowl gouge. I'm sure you've heard it before, but the tool really doesn't know what the wood doesn't know what the tool is called. Nip dent in there for it. Generally like that a little bit flat. How many folks in the crowd make hollow vessels? Not many. It's really a lot of fun. Once you get done with, you know, all the bowls you can make, it's a little bit something different to do. I like boxes too, for that same reason. That shape is not a bad shape for me. Looks like we have 15 minutes to get that out. Because I've made about 10 million of these. But that's kind of the goal at this stage of the game. What I would do now is there's 2 steps here in the process. And that one is I'm going to drill out the hole so I can actually start hollowing. I found these online, gosh, probably about 2 or 3 years ago. They are drill bits with Morse tapers on them. I absolutely love them because you don't have to be looking for your chuck. You can just jam this in here. So we're going to get this out far enough. And you know it's going to be on center. So what I typically do at this point in time is I measure how deep the hollow form is. And I know I have a set of calipers here to do it with. There we go. So I want to see roughly how deep the hollow form is. Minus whatever my wall thickness will be. So I'm looking at right about there. And I brought too many tools. So I'm looking at, it just so happens there's a mark right about where I need to be. So, always real slow. I like a twist drill for this because it ejects the chips a little bit better than like a Forstner bit would. Normally, you know, Forstner bit, you're going to start putting it in there and the chips just back up behind it. But with this, it kind of ejects the chips pretty good. The other thing I find out with these Morse taper bits is they tend to, there's so much meat to them that they don't tend not to wobble like a Forstner would also. So at this point in time, on this particular hollow form, there's 2 things that I would do. I'd drill it out, like I said, tried to do. And the other thing I would do is sand the exterior. You sand the exterior before you start, because if you're going to take it to final thickness on the inside, then you don't want to be sanding through to the, so that the exterior of the vessel meets the interior of the vessel. So with that said, I brought with me a piece that is drilled and sanded. And it should look real familiar because it should look almost exactly like this piece. The only difference being that I did this in my shop. Any questions so far? Yeah?
The procedure that you went to after you turned, is that for the purpose of telling yourself how deep you're going to hollow?
It's part of it. That's I take it to the depth in the center that I'm going to, you know, final wall thickness, and that is part of it. The other part is, with a hollowing tool, it's very difficult to get the hollowing tool in if you don't have some sort of opening. You can, I imagine you could, I don't know if I've ever even tried it, to go into a piece.
Could I ask you another question?
Sure.
Would you ever go, like say halfway, with maybe 1.5 inches or something like that, to hollow most of that wood out, and then do the procedure that you did?
If I had a green piece of wood, yeah. Because if I had green wood on the lathe, I would do that because I'm going to leave that pretty thick. So I would go maybe, you know, leave 1 inch or so on the bottom that I had not touched yet for that reason. Yeah, I've never tried actually just, you know, going in with a boring bar. It probably can be done. I just have never done it. So at this point, I'm ready to start hollowing. The hollowing rig that I use is a captive system. You don't have to work very hard with it. The hollowing without a captive system is really hard work. You are trying to counteract the forces of the tool wanting to rotate in your hands. And so they used to have, before the invention of this, they used to have these arm brace handles that would help you counteract the force of the tool actually turning. The problem is then all that force was transmitted up to your shoulder and your elbow, and a lot of turners had difficulty with their shoulders and elbows because of this. So I switched to, I hardly did any hollowing before I got the captive system, and now I use it for everything. Even the really small pieces, the Christmas ornaments, because of a couple of reasons. One being my setup. I have everything adapted to, right, this is a 3/8 tool here, goes into a 3/4 inch receiver. And that's what I use for my, you know, my ornaments, my you know, really small hollow vessels, that sort of thing. One of the safety features about a captive system like this is it is possible, as you push the handle in, that you can actually pull it out of the rest back here. That's a bad thing. So that's why I have the clamp here to keep that from happening. I don't want to know what happened to the guy who was the first person to discover that. I'm glad he did and I didn't.
Jameson did it.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Ow. I can't imagine how that felt. The other thing that I like to use is, I guess probably about a year ago, sometime in 2017, I got set up with a little camera and the display. Put the whole thing together for less than $100. I have references on the back to all the parts that I used for this. And it works like a champ. And normally, the way it used to be done before is you'd have a laser pointer, and that's where you could tell where the tip of the tool was. But when you moved orientation, you couldn't tell exactly. Let me switch to the bigger rest. That makes me nervous. You could possibly be cutting on the back side of the tool or the front of the tool and not where the laser was pointing. As soon as I saw this, I said, this is the thing to do. Another safety thing is you don't want to run off the end of the rest. So the way that this works is while the tool is out of the vessel, I'll take my dry erase marker. I know when I am working with this, since I've done it so many times, I trace the outline of the tool onto, actually I have a piece of plastic out of a strawberry container, fresh strawberry container, and I can trace, put the outline of the tool there, and just to the outside. Sometimes I'll get a ruler and measure it, but I know that the thickness of the line is roughly going to be 1/8 of an inch for a wall thickness. So, hollowing. Start out with the straight tool. I have a hole drilled to roughly where I want to start, where I want the final depth to be. And with the tool in the brace, or in the rig, just want to move it in a little bit because I'm probably not going to be able to reach the bottom. There we go. Much better.
Not flat there on the.
Yeah,
there we go.
I'll get there as I
Okay.
tighten it down. Okay, let's make some chips. When you're hollowing, you basically want to start picking out a couple of 3 passes. In the top here. And your only limitation with this system is how far can you swing that tool out. There are other systems like this that instead of this backrest like this and the tool rest up front, they have an articulated arm and you don't need the backrest. Looked at them. I don't think it's better than this. So I can see where my tool is on the screen. Now, let's talk about sharpening these tools. These tools are all scraping tools. So they get the same treatment that my handheld scrapers get. Which is about, I'm going to say about a 60-degree grind on the front, pretty aggressive. The biggest difference being is I don't put a negative rake on these tools. And does everybody understand what that is? What a negative rake scraper does for you? When I get to doing some of the bits with a handheld scraper, I can talk to you about it. But basically, it's a scraper that's ground on the top face at about 60 degrees, and on the bottom face about 60 degrees. It takes a very aggressive tool and makes it way less aggressive. As you get deeper into this, you're just trying to waste away the wood inside there, so that when I try to get to the final dimensions, I can get the hook tool in there. Because the second tool that I'll go in here with is a curve tool. And let you get around the tight space. One thing you can do with the straight tool is get close to the final dimensions on the towards the bottom. And I'm going to move the tool rest up a little bit because I'm getting farther and deeper into the vessel. Lathe speed, I'm turning about 1,000 RPM here. Since I turned this, I think I turned this piece on Friday, it must have been wetter than I thought it was. It looked like it was about 10% moisture content. But it's moved a little bit. I can see the movement. Yes?
Can you elaborate a little bit on the camera, what it does for you?
Oh, sure. Actually, I can show you. I can show you to the overhead camera. I don't know why you can't really see that. I'll put it this way. What I did is, while the tool was out of the vessel, like this, I traced the outline of the tip. And as you can see, because the camera is directly over the tip, it moves with the tool. When it goes inside, I have that outline then. Knowing that when I get close to the wall, when I start to see the wall on the edge of the vessel down here, I know that I'm getting close to final thickness. The advantage to that is, I mean, years ago, like I said, they had the laser pointer. The laser pointer might be focused on this part of the tool, but I'm actually cutting with the tip here. And the tip could be maybe, 2 or 3 millimeters farther away from the laser. And that's bad because then you're cutting with something and you have no idea where it is. This system here allows me to see almost the entire tool as to what it's doing inside the vessel, which I think is extraordinary. I have to admit, I didn't invent this, but whoever did was brilliant. So that's an explanation of how this works. Did everybody see that and understand it? Excellent. Yeah, I'm getting real close to I'm probably about a ½ inch on the bottom part here. I don't know if you can see that or not. My actual tool tip is the back one, and it's looking like it's maybe a ½ inch, maybe 3/4 from the edge there. I mean, this is pretty easy work. Like I said, I don't like to work hard as a wood turner. There are times I'm forced to, but this is pretty straightforward. The limitation of the straight tool is sometimes, you just don't have enough width to get around the corner because this becomes a fulcrum here. And you just can't get enough around the side to be able to get in there and hollow anymore. I'm going to cut this a little bit short. getting real close to the bottom. This tool is meant to cut on center line. And so before, when I came in and set it up with the tailstock in place, I was able to, you know, get it centered so that I know that when I'm down at the bottom here, I'm right at the middle of the hollow vessel. I'm going to switch tools. And these are the adapters that I made to go from 3/8 to 3/4. I actually made them on my wood lathe. It was pretty easy. So the next tool I'm going to switch to is this hook tool. Same cutting edge on it, but curved so I can get into the nooks and crannies here. And what I would do if I were in my home shop is I would take my compressor and blow this out a little bit. But hopefully we won't have any chips causing us problem. So now I have to readjust the camera. I just trace the outline there. So I'll know where that tool is cutting. And I don't know if I will get this done down to the final dimensions, but I brought another one with me to talk about the other stuff that I wanted to talk about tonight. One of the things that you see happens is there's a fair amount of force that wants to force that tool tip down. So now I'm going to try to go to as final a thickness as I can get to here. I also have, like I said, bigger tools for bigger vessels. Fortunately, these vessels are pretty small. Don't really need to go any big diameter tool. Let me turn this a little bit. And the mark that I'm working with is this mark right here. I don't know if you folks can see it or not. But as I work up towards the edge of the vessel, start to get that mark close to it. Can't see what I'm doing here. Okay, let's make some more chips.
Get your own bridge for it. You don't want anything you don't want.
two different kinds of cuts here. When going in, it's kind of a push cut with this, and then I kind of finish it with a full cut. And now I'm about, oh, I don't know. I guess that's probably what? There, about 1.5 inches in, something like that. But you can really hog away a lot of material pretty quickly doing this. The wall thickness is about 1/2 inch or so. Some of these chips.
I'm not complaining.
Here the wood's starting to get a little bit thinner. Well, the other way to tell how thin you are, you start to hear it make that kind of hissing sound when it's thin. One of the disadvantages of having a small opening as opposed to a larger opening, and that's just the way I like to work because smaller openings are more aesthetically pleasing to me, is you use smaller tools, but I have a fair amount of tool hanging out over the rest, and so it jumps around a little bit. One of the things as you're cutting, I can feel where there's ridges on the inside where the tool is cutting a little heavier than other spots. But you kind of have to work with that to get it as smooth as you can to the final dimensions. I went out of focus. There we go. Now it's in focus. Very close to the edge. And if you ever want to come up and take a look at this, look over my shoulder as I'm doing this, getting this to final thickness. See how quick. Just so we're not here till 10 o'clock. There is a set screw on this, but I haven't tightened it down lately. But so in the essence of time, any questions about how that vessel gets hollowed?
You're using these kind of tools because you're using such a small hole in the end, right?
Exactly, yeah. Otherwise, if if it was a bigger vessel, I'd be using a tool like this.
Okay. Well, with an even larger hole, you can get away with what's called a lot of friends of mine use the easy wood tools.
I haven't used them. You
have
might be
slate,
able to,
you
yeah.
have a slate hook, and then one's
Yeah,
got like
mhm.
a master hook on it.
Exactly, yeah. Because this is the tool I use for vessels like this size.
But that gets you that small hole. Okay,
Exactly,
gotcha.
yes. So,
What will you use this little small hole vessel for?
oh, it's purely decorative. You know, like look, even like if you look at some of the vessels I have over there, they have pretty small holes on them. They're purely decorative. They could be used, maybe something bigger than this. You could use it as a cremation urn or something like that, but that's about it.
Oh, dried flowers.
Yeah. Well, actually, if you put it, the next thing we do, I got myself stuck. Trying to get the shavings out. It is a small hole. It's about the size of my my middle finger. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is, okay, let's put a collar and a cap on. Collar and a cap. If you look over there, those vessels over there, most of them have at least a collar on. There's one natural edge hollow form over there, but they have collars and caps on them, and finials for that matter. So let's talk about that. Materials for that are a little bit different than what I would use for a hollow vessel. I like to use things like blackwood for collars and caps and finials. The other thing is I like it to be a contrasting wood. If the vessel is very dark, like a walnut vessel, I like things that are close grained, like holly and maple for that. The finials, the closer grained the wood, the better the finial will be. As a matter of fact, since we're talking collars and caps, go into my bag of tricks here. I brought with me a collar and a cap and a finial. And these were just practice pieces that I made at home. Some features of it. The collar is made to fit, assuming, if I had done this with a hollow vessel actually, it's made to fit into the top of the hollow vessel. I have a curve there that I find appealing. I also have a indentation here that is beveled. On the cap, I have a corresponding, more or less, bevel. It helps to center the cap in the collar. Also, well, the finial is the finial. I like repeated shapes, especially in something like this. So I have this curve repeated here and repeated here also. And I think from a design point of view, that's appealing. So to make these, I'll have to take the hollowing rate down, but we can pass this around if you wanted to take a look at that. Like I said, it's a practice piece.
Hey, George,
Yeah,
I'm gonna make some question for you.
sure.
On your vessel there, can you cut it in half, take the stuff out, and then glue it back together?
I know a guy who used to do these vessels with these really long necks on them, and that's exactly what he did. He would cut it in half, and he would hide the glue line somehow.
Yeah, he sanded it off.
Yeah, I don't know if he sanded it off because the grain at some point in time the grain's not going to match up. What he did is he put some feature there, like maybe a there was a bead or something there that hid where they were joined together. And they were actually really elegant looking vessels.
Yeah.
I've never tried that. I don't have faith in me to be able to get the grain to line back up.
We don't need to, we use another, use a piece of wood in there like you're putting.
I would like to see
Yeah.
TV.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
I've done things with
So-
stuff that.
And on the handout shows you the camera, which is, I think they
Yeah,
call
I'm
it.
talking about. But
First person video
instead of-
cameras.
Instead of take a piece out, right? just
Back
cut it,
up,
and then put a
monitor.
different colored piece of wood in there.
They're like
And-
$40.
Yeah.
He cleaned out both of his hairs, and he glued it back together.
Sure.
When he put it back in the lathe, he just sanded, so you see that?
So now, this is the line that I'm working towards.
I can show you the
And
picture.
That's what I'm saying, you need to make a little quarter-inch groove.
but I didn't get real close. Just
So the tip of your tool
is right there. And I know that with this system, if I'm going to cut with this part of the tool, I don't want to get that close to the edge. I want to cut with this part
Said he built it.
or this part.
He made that all.
And it's
didn't
really
he?
not complicated. It's the backup
He
monitor,
made about 6 of them.
the camera, there's a
Much up I had
connector, and a 12-volt power supply. All the stuff that I bought, everything else I had hanging around the shop.
I put
You want keys for like
a lot of pieces together.
Yeah, and when I'm done, I'll take an alcohol wipe, wipe it clean, and I'm back to where I started.
Walden chair.
Yeah. Under,
Yeah. And with them, if you cut it in half,
Right.
the piece right in there.
I have to make anything big.
any other questions?
Did
Here's
you
what
make
we're
that
doing.
homemade yourself?
What's that?
Is that a homemade?
Now, I had a homemade one. I made it out of wood, but I got a new lathe, and it was bigger, so I just bought one.
In the Packard books, $500.
Yeah, I forget what this piece was. I bought it separately because I had the other pieces.
I'm sure it's like 300.
Might be. I can't imagine I paid that much for it though. But you can, that is the, that's the part that is easiest to make.
That's what deters you from, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that is, the piece that I made out of 2x lumber was probably, I mean, it might have had
You can
all
get
of
that wrought
maybe.
iron at Home Depot.
What's
Weld it
that?
up. You can get that wrought iron at Home Depot and weld it up.
Yeah, I'm not a welder. Not yet.
No, I'm saying,
Yeah.
somebody help you out.
Yeah. It really is really simple stuff. And the only, like I said, the only reason I got it was because I had, you know, I got a bigger lathe, and the one that was for my 16-inch wouldn't fit on my 24. Okay. Collars, caps, finished.
Expensive legs.
The first thing you do when you are making a collar for a vessel is measure the opening. And I use my, can't find them of course, up here. But you can guesstimate. Usually use my digital calipers, and they're on the bench there somewhere, but I have no idea where. What I would do, use my calipers here, and that's the measurement I'm going to shoot to. And I'm actually going to remove this from the lathe right now, if I can find the chuck key. Nothing fancy here, I just turned, it's actually another piece of cherry. I have a lot of it in my shop apparently. I hope this fits. Yeah. What I got here, piece of cherry, 2x round it off, and I know
10,000.
dimensions of the hole that I'm shooting towards. So this becomes just a spindle turning project at this point. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a curve that looks pleasant to me. And this is just turning a cove, basically. And then I'm going to size the tenon to fit the opening. And I'm not going to get real close to where the collar is. And how many folks turn left-handed? Sometimes it's the only way you can get to where you want to go. Yeah. That is to the size of the opening now. So at this point, I'm going to drill out the opening, hopefully, if I get cooperation from the tailstock here. And I'm only going to go to a depth, maybe an inch. Just so I know where nothing complicated. Just going to drill this out. About an inch. And I'm going to use my square scraper to make that bevel on the inside of that. And the goal being, I could also turn it with a spindle gouge, but I find there's a little bit more control with this. This scraper, like I said, all my handheld scrapers have a negative rake on them. I'm trying to remember where I learned that from. I think it was Cindy Drozda showed us that at a demo that we had at Buck's Turner's one time. And it's like, wow, it takes a scraper and instead of making it almost uncontrollable, makes it a piece of cake. So the goal being, put a little bit of a bevel on the inside here. It does help if you kind of estimate what the angle is center, because I'm going to try to burn it a little bit. Put them in a hurry. Clean it up a little bit. This is the same bevel that I'm going to put on the piece. That mates with it. this is a scraper I use for my boxes, so it also has a cutting edge on the side. So that's roughly the bevel that I want there. And now I'm going to get that tenon and the underside here to look the way I want it to look. So, any parting tool will do. The fellow mentioned earlier about his going to the symposium this past weekend. And I remember one of the first symposium I ever went to was an AAW one in Minneapolis. And for one of the first demonstrations I went to was a fellow by the name of Dave Lancaster. And Dave was a professional bowl turner. And so he made bowls. He made lots of bowls. And he said one thing that I will never forget that stuck with me to this day, and that is vibration is the enemy of the wood turner. And so if you hear vibration, feel vibration, your cut's not going to be good, you're going to have problems. And that stuck with me. So now I have a collar that has a tenon on it. Should be roughly the size of the opening in the vessel. I'm doing an undercut on that so that when it mates with the vessel, it'll be flat against the surface of the vessel. And normally, I'd be using my narrow parting tool for this, but in the mass of tools that I brought with me, I can't seem to find my narrow parting tool. There it is. Because that gets in there just a little bit better than the 1/8 inch one does. And what I'm shooting for is to make that undercut be the same size as the tenon. I apologize for not having this right. One thing about my parting tools, I don't know if anybody noticed, but all of my parting tools I have sharpened like this, with a very slight curve here and a curve like that there. I've been doing it this way for probably 10 years. I think it gives you a much more durable surface for the parting tool. Instead of being at the narrow edge, it's actually a pretty broad edge. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't like to name drop, but I think Dave Ellsberg does his that way. Okay, at this point, if I were sanding here, I would sand this and finish it to final finish. I'm not going to do that today. But I am going to part it off. So now I have a collar. And this should be roughly, oh yeah, fits it like a champ. The idea being that it's actually a little bit small for this, but I can center it without too much difficulty. So what I would do at this point, a little bit of medium set super glue, some accelerator, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that vessel back on the lathe. Actually, is this the one? This is the one. Yeah, this fits a little bit tighter. Even a lot tighter. What you can always do here, and I'll show you my cheat, is if this doesn't fit, what you can do is take your pocket knife and make the opening a little bit bigger, or make the piece a little bit smaller.
Corks always should be bigger than the hole,
Yep.
always.
So, medium set super glue. Put it on this vessel. Hole's a little bit bigger. Maybe. It's not gonna stick. I'll do it this one. Probably gonna break it. Nope. Coming. And the importance of this, there's one important feature to this whole thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reach in to that vessel and turn away what I don't want. Hopefully. Or I'll glue my fingers to it. That's the other possibility. And I don't say that I've never done that before. Yeah.
Did you bring the acid up?
No, I didn't. I'll be going home like this. There we go. Oh, it doesn't want to go.
Don't force it, get a bigger hammer.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I was just getting ready to do. That's the other part. You drop it on the floor. There's nothing worse than gluing your fingers together.
Don't want to do that.
Put it in a lathe and make the hole bigger.
Yeah, I might have to do that just a touch. Because that's what I'm going to do anyway. It'd take me, probably take me longer to get that in there than it will take me to put it in back in the lathe and make the hole a fraction bigger. I've also been known at home, have a little bit of sandpaper.
That's it. Yep, little sandpaper and put it in the hole. Make the
Yeah,
hole.
just make it to make it a
the hole
touch bigger
fit
to fit.
Fit the tendon.
But this will work.
Make the more than fit the tendon. Don't make the tendon fit the more than.
Yeah. Just going to take a little bit off. Should I just knock on the floor? What did wood turners do before there was super glue?
Just kill a horse.
Yeah, great. Yeah, tight bond.
There's lots of horse glue
Yeah,
years ago.
hide glue, mucilage. Mucilage, I don't think would work.
Make it out of horse grooves.
There we go. So, that has now made it to that. And I can take homemade tool out of an Allen wrench. Made a little scraper out of it. So I'm going to go in there and take away everything that shouldn't be there.
Sorry.
I could also, if I wanted to, go in with the tool that I hollowed with. But that might be just a touch too aggressive. I like this tool because it's, it just reaches in just enough to make that flush now.
So you're scraping away with a 2-wood matting.
Yep, where they met. So that, now that collar's made it to the piece, I've turned away everything that was sticking inside. So now it feels like they meet right there. And the next thing to do is to make the cap for it. I usually, when I do this at home, make the cap from the same piece of wood that I made the collar with. And that's what I'm going to do tonight, too. So the cap, when I go to measure the dimensions for the cap, there are two dimensions matter. Dimension number 1 is what's the bore there, and dimension 2 is how big is it from here to here. So where are my calipers? There's a set, and there's a set there. So I'm going to eyeball this. To see what this dimension is. That's good. And eyeball the board. Of the cap and a finial like this, it just looks, to me, it looks really classy. So, let's get rid of this. And start to think about the shape for the cap. Like I said, I like repeated shapes. So I have that cove on the collar. So I'm going to try to replicate that on the cap a little bit. Some of that. Have a flat place to drill. And then I'm going to start turning to some diameters here. Parting tool. This is the diameter of the bore. So that's the first thing that I'm going to go after. Yeah,
Did your tool rest base move?
it might have. Oh, yeah, you're right, it did. Thank you. I didn't bear down on that. I'm going to turn this left-handed. Go. I have a 10 in there, and that's going to sit down inside the bore of the cap. And now, the next thing I need to do is get the outer diameter roughly the same diameter as the outside of the bevel. And I'm also thinking about I'm also thinking about the actual angle of the bevel. More comfortable doing this way today. I don't know why. Maybe it's filleted. Okay. So that is the diameter of the outside of the bevel. Make it all consistent diameter. And at this point, I'm going to get the final shape that I want here. And one of the things I haven't talked about today at all is one of my favorite topics, and that's tool control. But one of the things that I like to make sure I do when I have the tool in my hand is it's against my body, and I have the end of the tool in my hand instead of choking up here, which I don't like to do, but I will do it on a parting tool. So now I've made the cap approximately the same bevel as, as the collar. And get this to the dimension that I want. thing I'll do, move all this stuff off of my bench here, and I'll drill a hole for the finial. I'm going to bore this out to 1/4 inch diameter. The goal here is just to drill a little hole in here, 1/4 inch diameter, so that when I make the finial, I'll put a 1/4 inch tenon on it. Doesn't need to be real deep. And I will part this off. With a little bit of the tenon that I have here left. And even though and normally what I would do at home is drop my tool on the floor, pointy end down, but I would take this and I would reverse it, either with jam chuck. It's about as good as the one that I made yesterday. With a jam chuck or vacuum chuck to get rid of that last little bit there. So finial. You could almost have an entire demo on finials, but I'm going to see if I can turn one in 20 minutes or less. So I'm going to hog away as much of this wood as I can. Make it almost look like a 3/4 inch plank. And for hogging large amounts of wood away at a time, I don't think anything could beat a bowl gouge. It's a nice stiff tool that you can hang over the rest a fair amount and not have to worry about it. I mean, that's actually my 3/8 gouge, not even my heavy duty gouge. And I got that down to roughly 3/4 of an inch without much effort. So, tools that I prefer for finial. Typically, and I was sitting right here, something like 3/8 spindle gouge. And the trick to a finial like this is start at the end, do as much turning as you're going to do at the end, and never go back and touch it again. And I know I had the center in there, so I'm going to try to go a little bit past that. And the other thing about turning finials, you have to be comfortable with an uphill cut. The tool really does not want to cut in that direction. So you kind of have to force it a little bit. But it is the best for turning away the bowl. So at this point, if I have that first ½ inch or so, the way I like it, I would get out my 400 grit sandpaper, sand that, take 600 grit paper, sand that, and I'd be done. And then I'd go work on the next 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. And remember earlier when I said vibration is the enemy of the wood turner? That is never so true as it is when you're doing this. So I'm leaving the mass of the wood here, and I am turning away as much as I have courage for. And I don't know if I said this earlier, but one of the things about turning finials like this, you can hear that singing a little bit because it's starting to vibrate. What you want in a finial like this, for the material, is you want the absolute straightest grain wood that you can find. Because if the wood has grain that's going sideways on it a little bit, it will show itself when you least want it to, when you're doing a finial like this. So the first thing you look for in a blank is nice, straight wood. I like to blend, make sure everything's blended well. When I attack this piece of wood. One thing you can do is if you feel that a little bit uncomfortable, you can reach around here and support it a little bit and make your cuts. I don't know if you folks are noticing, this is a tool control thing also. I'm not really moving the tool, but I'm moving my body. Called the wood turner's dance. And when it comes to making a curve, that may be the easiest way to do it. With the tool in tight to your body. And moving your body, not the tool. Once again, that's uphill cut. Doesn't really like it a whole lot. Cutting with almost a scraping cut with this part of the tool here. That toe. Blend that a little bit better. I can feel that vibrating. Like I said, normally I'd be sanding this in between. I'm running out of wood here. I'm running out of sharp edge. I'm running out of tool rest, which is even more of a big deal. So now I have all this massive wood behind me on my cuts. So I don't really have to get too concerned. You can still break it, but it's much less likely to break. And the last thing to do is, well, finish this off and turn the tenon. And one of the things I absolutely love about doing a tenon with a 1/4 inch hole is I have this lovely 1/4 inch caliper. that I can work to. This is one cut I'm going to make with my right. And there's my 1/4 inch tenon. And last but not least, if I can lay hands on it, my narrow parting tool. And finial. A collar. And it's a little bit long, but I would take a little bit of sandpaper and do that. But a finial, a collar, and a cap. And that may be the fastest I've ever turned one of them.
I use 3/8 inches.
You guys want to pass that around? You can take a look.
Hang on.
I'll send it this way.
Better, thank you.
You're welcome. There you go.
You know it'll work on court.
Any questions?
Any preferable wood for finials?
Oh, like I said, black wood. I've also made them out of things like yellow heart, anything that is close grained. Really works well. Coco Bolo. Unfortunately, it's all of the exotics.
Have you tried pear wood?
Pardon me? I have not tried pear. Pear would probably work pretty well.
Pear or apple?
Yeah, the things you want to avoid, actually dogwood works very nicely also. Really tight grained wood. Things with open grains like oak and ash, things like that, not going to work. Figured woods also don't work very well because the grain tends to be going in multiple directions at the same time, and a thin finial will break in a heartbeat. Don't ask me how I know that. that was a tough lesson to learn. I was trying to make a finial for a Christmas ornament, and I'm turning and turning and turning, and I wanted to make it out of this figured wood, and it was like, I get it just to where I wanted it, and then snap. And I think it was because it was figured. So. Anybody else? Well, thank you all for your attention. I think I'm just about on time. I don't have if you have any questions at all, my email is on the handout. I'll be glad to answer questions via email or anything like that. Just let me know.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
No.